The House will be in order. The chair lays before the House a communication from the Speaker.
The Speaker's Rooms, Washington, D.C., September 19, 2023. I hereby appoint the Honorable Ben Cline to act as Speaker pro tempore on this day. Signed, Kevin McCarthy, Speaker of the House of Representatives.
Pursuant to the order of the House of January 9, 2023, the chair will now recognize members from lists submitted by the majority and minority leaders for morning hour debate. The chair will alternate recognition between the parties, with time equally allocated between the parties and each member other than the majority and minority leaders and the minority whip, limited to 5 minutes, but in no event shall debate continue beyond 11:50 a.m. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Nebraska, Mr. Flood, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today I rise to honor manufacturers across the 1st District of Nebraska. Manufacturing is Nebraska's largest industry. According to the National Association of Manufacturers, manufacturing accounts for 11.81% of the total output in Nebraska, employing 9.8% of our workforce. Across the 1st District, these manufacturers are creating jobs. In Nucor, Norfolk, Nebraska, it produced 33.6 million tons of steel over the last 50 years. Plattsmouth is home to the first creatine manufacturer in the United States. Blaser Athletic fabricates sports equipment in Columbus. And Kawasaki makes train cars in Lincoln that ship to Washington, D.C. and New York City. You should also know that Fremont is producing rotisserie chickens and other products for Costco stores across North America. On behalf of the people of Nebraska's 1st Congressional District, I want to extend our sincere thanks to all the manufacturers who are helping make our communities a great place to live, work, and raise a family. Keep up the great work. Mr. Speaker, I rise today to honor Northeast Community College as they celebrate their 50th anniversary. Our community college system plays a critical role in educating the next generation of Nebraska's workforce, and Northeast Community College is leading the way. The college started with 6 buildings on its main campus on the edge of Norfolk in 1973. Today it boasts campuses in South Sioux City, West Point, Norfolk, and O'Neill. Under the leadership of President Leah Barrett, the college has been making moves. A $22 million investment at the Ackley Family College Farm is setting the college up to become a leader in veterinary technology. In the spring, Northeast announced the launch of a new agriculture diesel mechanic apprenticeship program. And this fall, the college broke new ground on a new facility in South Sioux to add welding booths and a CDL training building. On behalf of the people of Nebraska's 1st Congressional District, I want to extend our sincere congratulations to Northeast Community College on 5 great decades. Mr. Speaker, I rise today to honor the Columbus Sales Pavilion as they celebrate their 90th anniversary. Founded by M.H. Vanberg in 1933, it is now owned by a 4th-generation family. In a day and age when people switch jobs frequently, the Sales Pavilion has a local and loyal workforce, with some employees boasting over 30 years with their team. Nebraska is the beef state, and sale barns like the Columbus Sales Pavilion are not only critical to our economy, but they are also at the heart of our ag community. I recently visited the Columbus Sales Pavilion during an auction. I can tell you that the Sales Pavilion is more than a market. It is a place of connection and community for producers across the area. This doesn't happen by accident. It happens because the owners have made it their stated mission to make Columbus a better place. On behalf of the people of Nebraska's 1st Congressional District, I want to extend our sincere congratulations to the Columbus Sales Pavilion on 90 great years. Mr. Speaker, I rise today to recognize one of the most iconic places in Nebraska, Memorial Stadium. This fall, the Huskers are celebrating 100 years of the stadium. Through these gates pass the greatest fans in college football. That has been proven for the last century. On game dates, Memorial Stadium becomes the 3rd largest city in Nebraska, with more than 90,000 fans gathering at every home game. Since 1962, we have sold out every single game. That's 390 consecutive sellouts. The love for Husker athletics was shown once again at Memorial Stadium just weeks ago when 92,003 fans attended a Husker volleyball match on Osborne Field, setting a world record for the most attended women's sporting event. Some of the greatest college football coaches of all time have called plays in Memorial Stadium, like former Congressman Tom Osborne and Bob Devaney. And this season begins with the Matt Rule area, who just got his first win in the stadium last week. Congratulations to the university, and go Big Red. Mr. Speaker, I rise today to wish the Bellevue Women's Club a happy anniversary as they approach 100 years in service. In 1924, the Bellevue Women's Club began serving their community, and by 1929, they were already taking on big projects, like helping start the first Bellevue Library and the city's first swimming pool. Through their 100 years, this nonprofit has contributed their time and money to some of Sarpy County's most significant organizations and events, like the Arrows to Aerospace Parade, Habitat for Humanity, and the Ronald McDonald House. Their club members' support for a wide array of organizations in Sarpy County is unmatched as they give back through the Senior Community Center, Books for Babies, and the Bellevue Food Pantry. The scope of their work through the years is very impressive. On behalf of Nebraska's 1st Congressional District, congratulations to the Bellevue Women's Club on their first century, and here's to the next. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I yield back.
With no member of the minority seeking recognition, recognizes the gentlewoman from Texas, Ms. Dela Cruz, for 5 minutes.
Mr. Speaker, I ask for unanimous consent to address the House for 5 minutes.
The gentlewoman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for yielding me this time. I stand before you today to address a critical issue that is affecting the livelihoods of countless Americans across South Texas. The drought conditions and water scarcity we are witnessing in the Rio Grande Valley are causing untold hardships to our farmers and our residents. As stipulated in the 1944 Water Treaty, Mexico is obligated to provide the United States with an average of 350,000 acre-feet of water annually over a 5-year cycle. Unfortunately, Mexico has consistently delayed fulfilling this commitment, leaving American farmers in dire straits. This year, South Texas farmers are poised to plant their crops, but they need water now. Without it, they face the prospect of harvesting only half of what they would yield in a typical year. This has far-reaching consequences, impacting our national food supply, increasing food costs for families, and heightening our dependence on foreign agriculture. Moreover, communities in South Texas are now facing water restrictions, exacerbating the strain on families and businesses alike. The Mexican government bears a responsibility to honor the terms of this treaty. American farmers and ranchers should not bear the burden of Mexico's failure to uphold its end of the bargain. I implored the Biden administration to take immediate action and hold Mexico accountable. Failure to convene official meetings addressing this issue will result in catastrophic consequences for South Texas farmers. Just last week, I had the privilege of introducing a bipartisan House resolution aimed at bolstering diplomatic relations to encourage Mexico's compliance with the 1944 Water Treaty. This resolution, historic resolution, underscores our support for negotiations that ensure more predictable water deliveries to the United States, and it urges new commitments to guarantee at least 350,000 acre-feet of water are delivered annually. I would like to extend my deepest gratitude to my colleagues from both sides of the aisle who have co-sponsored this crucial resolution. I would also like to thank all of the local officials from my community who have been working closely with me on this matter. Together, we are sending a powerful message. Clean water is not a partisan issue. This is an American issue. Through collaborations and diplomatic engagement, we can forge a framework for responsible water management that benefits both of our great nations. Let us stand united in ensuring that the promises of the 1944 Water Treaty are not just ink on paper, but a lifeline for the American farmers who feed our nation. With that, I thank you and I yield back.
The chair recognizes the gentlewoman from North Carolina, Ms. Manning, for 5 minutes.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to celebrate the 150th anniversary of Bennett College, which I have the privilege of representing in Congress. In 1873, Bennett got its start as a school for elementary and secondary students in the basement of Warnersville Methodist Episcopal Church. Now, Bennett College, located in Greensboro, North Carolina, stands as one of only 2 all-women's HBCUs in the nation. In the 150 years since its founding, Bennett College and its alumni have made history. Bennett played a pivotal role in the civil rights movement in North Carolina. Before Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. gave his famous March on Washington speech, he traveled to Greensboro, North Carolina in February 1958. There, he was met with an overflowing crowd of young women, the Bennett Belles, at the Annie Murder Pfeiffer Chapel on Bennett's campus. This speech, Martin Luther King Jr.'s first speech ever given in Greensboro, had a lasting impact on the entire Triad community. 2 years after his speech on Bennett's campus, Bennett Belles participated in the famous Woolworth Counter Sit-In, the demonstration that ignited a movement of sit-ins for racial equality across the South and across the country, and changed the entire course of American history. In the years since then, Bennett's alumni have continued to make history. Bennett had the first black woman president of a 4-year college in the United States, Dr. Willa B. Player. Former Bennett College president Janetta Cole went on to lead the Smithsonian Institution's National Museum of African Art. Maida Ruth Gamble Norman was an early Hollywood film star in the 1930s. Dr. Dorothy Brown was the first woman to practice general surgery in the South in the 1940s. Carolyn Robertson Payton led the Peace Corps under President Jimmy Carter. Marian Tasco was Pennsylvania's first black county commissioner, and many more Bennett Belles have broken down barriers and have been the first to accomplish amazing feats. Today, Bennett continues to educate young minds and produce change makers. Bennett has been an influential institution in our nation's history, as well as a pillar of outstanding education in Greensboro, North Carolina. Congratulations to the Bennett Belles on 150 years of excellence.
The chair recognizes the gentleman from Arizona, Mr. Ciscomani, for 5 minutes.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today in honor of the Basis Oro Valley, a school in my district that has been included on the U.S. News and World Report's 2023 Best Public High Schools, securing the 21st position. This accomplishment is a testament to the hard work and dedication of our students, educators, and the entire school community. Basis Oro Valley prides themselves on their award-winning STEM curriculum and liberal arts program to help children pursue their dreams. From advanced AP courses to high-level music classes, this school has something for everyone. The average ACT score for Basis Oro Valley students is a 32, and the average SAT score is 1368. This is one of the best high schools in the country, and it is located right in Arizona 06, my district. With only being around since 2010, this school has made a huge impact in our community. I'm so proud of the teachers who make this a great experience for the kids and the kids that push themselves to be better every single day. I am proud to represent this outstanding school in Congress and to recognize the Basis Oro Valley School here today. And with that, I yield back.
The chair recognizes the gentlewoman from Washington, Ms. Perez, for 5 minutes.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to address the House for 5 minutes.
Gentlewoman is recognized.
Today, I rise to thank President Chris Bailey, who is retiring after dedicating 12 years to Lower Columbia College. Throughout his tenure, he diligently served students, staff, and the community, transforming Lower Community College into a vital educational hub in the region. As a testament to Chris's leadership, Lower Columbia College developed the Lower Columbia Regional University Center, enabling folks to work and access higher education pathways. Chris was pivotal in introducing the college's first 2 Bachelor of Applied Sciences degrees, as well as a vocational skills center, reflecting his commitment to expanding career opportunities for those at the college. We've been lucky to have a leader like Chris at Lower Columbia College. Chris, thank you. I wish you all the best and a well-deserved retirement. Mr. Speaker, I rise today to recognize Maloney Farms, a family-owned dairy farm in my district. A few weeks ago, I was able to visit a farm in Curtis, Washington, where I met the farm's owner, Maynard Maloney. Maynard is a 3rd-generation dairy farmer and a member of the Organic Valley Co-op. During my visit, I toured their farm, saw their new robotic milkers, and heard how Congress can support small organic farms. Maynard is passionate about working for something bigger than himself. He works to be a good steward of his land, and he's already taking steps with his son Jack to ensure that the family farm continues for generations to come. Everyone at Maloney Farms is fighting hard for their farm, and I'm grateful to be in this fight with them. My focus is to ensure that federal policy supports small family farms like theirs. Mr. Speaker, I rise today to address the Cowlitz Complex fire in the Gifford-Pinchot National Forest. So 30 fires might sound like a bad movie plot, but with 695 acres in flames and 342 hardworking folks trying to keep it all under control, it's the reality of our community. To the diligent task forces, the California Incident Management Team 13 and Rocky Mountain Incident Management Team 2, patrolling and monitoring the fires, especially around Pothole, Jackpot, and the Adams Fork region, your steadfastness does not go unnoticed. We're thankful that potential threats like the heat near Pothole turned out to be benign, but your preemptive actions are the backbone of our community's safety. Thank you to the folks working these fires, your tireless effort to protect our homes, our forests, and our future. Your commitment to containing these fires showcases the resilience of our community. Mr. Speaker, I rise today to pay tribute to the dedicated public servant and cherished member of our community, Sergeant Richard Kelly. On August 10th, we lost Sergeant Kelly unexpectedly due to a medical emergency while in the line of duty. He was only 54. Sergeant Kelly's commitment to safeguarding our community was unwavering. He served the Battleground Police Department since 2005, where he ultimately rose to the rank of sergeant in 2019. Not only was he an officer of the law, he was a husband, father, a brother, and a pillar of our community, respected and loved by all who had the privilege of knowing him. I personally recall his attentive presence at my Battleground Town Hall, a testament to his deep sense of duty and connection to the people that he served. His loss leaves a void in our community and in the hearts of all who knew him. Today, I ask my colleagues to join me in honoring the life and service of Sergeant Richard Kelly. Our thoughts and prayers are with his family, his colleagues, and the entire Battleground community during this time. May his dedication serve as a lasting inspiration to us all. Mr. Speaker, I rise to remember and honor Corporal Zach Clayton Murrill, who passed away on August 20th. After graduating from college, Zach joined the Army, distinguishing himself as a captain of the 82nd Airborne and leading an explosive ordnance team in Afghanistan. His commitment and valor earned him the Bronze Star, among other commendations. After the Army, Zach's call to service led him to the Vancouver Police Department, where he became an integral member of the crisis negotiation team and was eventually named unit leader. But beyond the badges and commendations, Zach was a loving husband, son, brother, and uncle. He was also had a profound bond with his grandfather, Stanley Murrill, also a Korean War veteran, which speaks volumes about his deep roots in service and sacrifice. Corporal Murrill's legacy of service, both on the battlefield and on our streets, will forever inspire and remind us of the sacrifices made by those who choose to serve. I send my deepest condolences to his family, friends, and all who had the privilege of knowing him. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield back.
The chair recognizes the gentleman from Georgia, Mr. Carter, for 5 minutes.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to recognize the Director of the Federal Law Enforcement Training Centers, Dr. Thomas J. Walters, for his 44 years of service to the United States. Director Walters oversaw the training and management program for new law enforcement officers across the country, including those at the Glencoe, Georgia campus in my district. Mr. Walters dedicated his entire 4-decade career to defending our national security, serving as a Border Patrol agent and in various leadership positions. He embodies both patriotism and leadership, and the next generation of officers is undoubtedly grateful for his expertise and the example he set. Director Walters emphasized that serving as the FLETC director was an honor and a career highlight. I know I speak for the whole 1st District when I say we appreciate his dedication to law enforcement and his service to others. I welcome the new FLETC director, Benjamin Carey Huffman, and I wish him the best of luck. Mr. Speaker, I rise today in remembrance of Lieutenant Colonel David Leonard Sharp. At the age of 81, he leaves behind a legacy of bravery, leadership, and selflessness. In 1966, he graduated U.S. Army Ranger School and became the first Army Ranger in the Georgia National Guard. He served in the U.S. Army Reserves and Georgia National Guard for 41 years from 1960 to 2001. We remember him not only for his military accomplishments, but also for his dedication to his community. He excelled as a mechanical drawing teacher at Glen Academy High School in Brunswick. In the summers, he worked on commercial and residential planning. I know Mr. Sharp's legacy will live on in the positive impact he had on his community, and I would like to extend my deepest condolences to his family. Mr. Speaker, I rise today to celebrate the University of Georgia's Forestry and Natural Resources Dean, Dale Green, for his decades of accomplishments before he retires at the end of the year. Green has consistently displayed his passion for teaching and students throughout his time working at UGA, and he has been a key factor in the success of many young leaders. Green joined the University of Georgia in 1986, and since then has won several awards, including but not limited to the Herrick Award for Superior Teaching, the Wise Owl Award, the Silver Beaver Award from the Georgia Boy Scouts of America, and the Billy Hudson Distinguished Citizen Award. Green was also inducted into the Georgia Foresters Hall of Fame in 2007 for his efforts in expanding research and funding at his university. I'm proud to commemorate such a hardworking individual that has aided in so many Georgians' postgraduate success in agriculture. Mr. Speaker, I rise today to congratulate the Crab Shack for being named one of the best seafood restaurants in the United States by the Food Network. On the charming Tybee Island of Georgia sits the Crab Shack, known for its outstanding fresh seafood, river views on the marsh of Chimney Creek, and extensive choice of in-house events. This unique restaurant is a perfect spot for vacationing families with a wide range of food options, activities, and incredible Southern hospitality service. Savannah locals, Jack and Belinda Flanagan, developed the Crab Shack from nothing more than a few tables and some friends, and since then has developed into an iconic river spot for all to enjoy. An alligator enclosure on the property's outer boundaries attracts numerous people who come to feed the young gators. I'm proud to celebrate the accomplishments of this local restaurant, which brings many visitors to the beautiful islands of Georgia. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I yield back.
The chair recognizes the gentlewoman from California, Ms. Pelosi, for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this month we observe the 50th anniversary of the coup in Chile. It is important to note that the role that the House played in declassifying documents relating to the United States' role in the coup of Allende and the presidency of Pinochet. In 1999, and I rise to pay tribute to our former colleague, Maurice Hinchey, he introduced legislation to declassify documents related to the coup in Chile. Following his leadership, I took his legislation to the House Intelligence Committee conference discussion. In our markup of the conference report of the Intelligence Authorization Act for fiscal year 2000, I was successful in getting the amendment passed in the committee that mirrored the Hinchey legislation. This language was sustained on the floor, and when the FY 2000 bill was signed by President Clinton, it became law. The legislation stated that no longer than 270 days following enactment, we wanted a shorter period of time, they wanted a longer period of time. This was the compromise. 270 days following the enactment, the CIA had to submit a report on all of its activities and various events in Chile in 3 categories: the assassination of President Salvador Allende, the ascension of Pinochet to the presidency, and the violation of human rights committed by the henchmen of President Pinochet. In 2001, therefore, the CIA prepared 16,000 documents for declassification, and since then, thousands more documents, maybe up to around 23,000 documents, have been declassified. During the debate on the FY 2000 legislation, it was argued that the search for documents related to human rights violations in Chile, now we're talking about murder, disappearances, imprisonment, torture. That's what we're talking about, human rights violations, directed by the National Security Council was sufficient. They said, we did that, it's sufficient. They said nothing further was needed and raised the question of how much money will this cost and how much time will it take of the Director of Central Intelligence to produce an adequate report. But Mr. Hinchey argued, Maurice Hinchey argued, in these words, it is time that the Central Intelligence Agency accounted for its role in the military coup that toppled the democratically elected government and Salvador Allende's government and led to his death. The American people need to know how our government supported the rise of Augusto Pinochet, a ruthless dictator who systematically murdered and tortured his enemies. Those were the words of Maurice Hinchey. In May of 2016, I had the privilege of leading a strongly bipartisan congressional delegation to Chile. When we visited the Museum of Memory and Human Rights, and I recommend that if you get to Chile, you certainly see that, it was emotional and gratifying for some of us to see the documents that we had declassified under Maurice Hinchey's leadership, helping bring the truth to light. To this day, in Chile, there is still great sadness about the loss of life and other crimes against humanity perpetrated by Pinochet's henchmen. Last week in Chile was the 50th anniversary, and at the observance, an event marking 50 years since the coup, President Gabriel Boric spoke eloquently about the importance of reconciliation and democracy. Democracy, democracy. He said it again and again. Thankfully, the president had also called for a plan to find the nearly 1,500 people who are still missing, unaccounted for them and for their families. It is my hope that this spirit will lead to more revelations and accountability. As we mark 50 years since the coup, I salute the leadership of Maurice Hinchey, Congressman Hinchey. He was a champion of justice not only in Chile, but in Argentina and other countries suffering under similar despotic regimes, including those affected by Operation Condor. Operation Condor was how all of these vicious dictators coordinated their activities. He saw the connection and coordination among the dictatorships in the death and violence in their country, and in relentlessly speaking out against it, he made a difference. His family is still active in civic life of New York State. He passed away on November 22nd, 2017, but his leadership in the fight for truth and justice continues to be an inspiration to us all. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield back the balance of my time.
The chair recognizes the gentleman from Pennsylvania, Mr. Thompson, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, before I was elected to serve in the House of Representatives, I spent nearly 30 years in the nonprofit healthcare field, assisting those facing life-changing disease and disabilities, a therapist, rehabilitation services manager, and a licensed nursing home administrator. I'm acutely aware of the challenges many face when it comes to obtaining reasonably priced health care. It is especially critical for rural America, like much of the 15th Congressional District of Pennsylvania that I'm honored to serve. As the member of Congress representing nearly 1/3 of the landmass of Pennsylvania, one of the most rural districts east of the Mississippi, I'm keenly aware of the problems that my constituents face when accessing medical services. We're facing a healthcare crisis in our nation's rural areas. These often disadvantaged populations are still struggling to access affordable, quality care. Many remain uninsured. Most are underinsured. However, access to quality care remains the largest challenge. Even when people gain access to health insurance, it doesn't mean equal access to care. Rural hospitals across the country are closing, leaving patients without access to their emergency rooms and long-term care facilities. In addition to hospital closures, a workforce shortage plagues rural America. The patient to primary care physician ratio in rural areas is only 39.8 physicians per 100,000 people, compared to 53.3 physicians per 100,000 in urban areas. Recruitment and retention of experienced professionals, including primary care physicians, is an ongoing challenge. Furthermore, the opioid epidemic that is sweeping the nation has ravaged our rural communities, leaving even more of the population in need of crucial health services. Adolescents and young adults living in rural areas are more vulnerable to opioid abuse than their urban counterparts. The prevalence of fatal drug overdoses has skyrocketed in rural areas. High unemployment and a greater rate of types of injuries that result in prescriptions for opioid medications have contributed to this. On March 5, 2010, Congress passed sweeping legislation, the Affordable Care Act, which fundamentally realigned our nation's health care system. Since passage of this bill, my worst nightmares have become a reality as the law's interpretation continues to drive up costs, saddle small businesses with burdensome regulations, and impose unfunded mandates on people throughout the Commonwealth by shifting costs from the federal government to the states. Unfortunately, what we have also seen since the passage of this law is the consolidation of providers in the healthcare industry. Small and independent providers were unable to bear the burden of ACA's various mandates, and many of them were forced to merge with larger health systems that have dramatically consolidated care over the last decade. Luckily, Congress has been able to repeal key components of this bill since it was first enacted, including the individual mandate. Additionally, as we emerge from the COVID-19 pandemic that uniquely strained rural healthcare systems in Pennsylvania and across the country, we must always look for ways to stabilize and recover from what has been a turbulent few years. Moving forward, we must provide common sense reforms that improve our nation's healthcare system and access across the country, including those in rural America. One of the best ways to do this is by promoting access to telehealth. As part of National Telehealth Awareness Week, this week I plan to reintroduce the Health Act, which allows community health centers and rural health clinics to continue to provide telehealth services and receive fair reimbursement for doing so. It is these types of policies that promote access to care for all Americans, and I look forward to working with my colleagues to fix our flawed healthcare system. Currently, healthcare costs have gone up Premiums have increased by double digits, but choices have decreased. That's not right, it's not fair, and it's not feasible. There must be a better way, and I know that together we will work to find a stable transition to a 21st century healthcare system that works for everyone in America, particularly those who live in rural regions where the need is great and services are scarce. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The chair recognizes the gentleman from California, Mr. Kiley, for 5 minutes.
Mr. Speaker, I wish to take a moment to recognize a cheerful, spirited, and vibrant community member residing in my district, Ms. Lisa Eck, for her 40 years of public service at the downtown Roseville Library. Ms. Eck embarked on her journey as a young teen, starting at the library as a quotidian shelver in 1983. In her tenure, she has become one of the most beloved librarians in our region. She is well known for her ability to captivate the magic of childhood through her lively readings. Dressing in full costume and performing books theatrically are just some of the ways that she captures the attention and adoration of Roseville children and residents. Ms. Eck's determination and dedication to bringing these stories to life knows no bounds, and her unique approach makes her storytime sessions a cherished tradition. Her special touch reaches all generations as she has marked the lives of tens of thousands of people over the years. Ms. Eck has an unfaltering commitment to promoting literacy and educational opportunities for our local youth, and her efforts have made an indelible impact in our communities. As a former English teacher, I understand the importance of developing a love for reading in students and value the efforts of those like Ms. Eck to foster that passion through her creative and innovative storytelling abilities. Therefore, on behalf of the United States House of Representatives, I am pleased to join the Roseville community in celebrating and recognizing Ms. Lisa Eck for her 4 decades of leadership as a librarian and her continued commitment to inspiring children and adults alike with a desire for knowledge and learning. Mr. Speaker, I would like to take a moment to recognize the centennial anniversary of a special business in my district, the Virginia Lakes Resort, the heart of the High Sierra, located in Mono County, California. In 1923, Walter Foster and Charles Foster signed an agreement with the Forestry Department to build a fish camp at Virginia Lakes. After the first year of operation, Walter Foster and his wife, Anita, became the sole owners and operated the business for 30 years. They quickly found success, as within the first 5 years of the business, they built several cabins that housed guests such as Hollywood stars Fred MacMurray, Betty White, and Lon Chaney. They're also known for hosting the 1938 USC football team for training before the team went on to win a national championship. The resort had a few different owners, such as the Coopers and Bill Newman, before the current owners, John and Carolyn Webb, began their journey in 1974. The Webbs will celebrate their 50-year anniversary as owners next year and are well known by others for their commitment to community engagement and dedication to providing an exceptional experience for their visitors. Today, the Virginia Lakes Resort offers key amenities such as rental cabins, boat rentals, tackle shop, and a cafe. Visitors enjoy the stunning scenery of the Sierra Nevadas while participating in a variety of recreational activities at the resort, such as camping, fishing, and hiking. Therefore, on behalf of the United States House of Representatives, I am honored to recognize the Virginia Lakes Resort for their 100-year anniversary and commend them for their significant contributions throughout the years to their community and the local economy. Mr. Speaker, I would like to recognize an exemplary individual who interned in my district office this summer. Jaime Robles ensured that people's voices were heard by taking down their concerns and sharing them with me, and he even helped people renew their passport and access the services and benefits they're entitled to receive from the federal government. Jaime is a recent graduate of Sierra College in Rockland and will be attending UC Berkeley in the spring to major in economics. He served as vice president and student senator of the Sierra College Student Senate, vice president of Student Engagement for Social Science Club, and is a Phi Theta Kappa Honor Society member. Jaime is also bilingual, and I've repeatedly been impressed with his ability to utilize that skill and serve our Spanish-speaking constituents. Mr. Speaker, Jaime has been a pleasure to have in my office, and like all our interns, has been a tremendous help to me and our team in serving the people of the 3rd Congressional District of California. I am incredibly grateful that he chose to invest his time and talents with us. On behalf of the United States House of Representatives, thank you, Jaime, for your commitment to public service. Thank you, and I yield back.
The chair recognizes the gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Klein, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, once again, members of the far left are disregarding this document, the United States Constitution, in order to undermine Americans' right to keep and bear arms. Just a few weeks ago, New Mexico Governor Lujan Grisham issued an executive order suspending the right to carry firearms in public across Albuquerque and Bernalillo counties for at least 30 days and fining those who don't comply. This political power grab is a blatant attack on the Second Amendment and should infuriate every American. It sets a dangerous precedent for the rights of law-abiding Americans and threatens the very freedoms we hold so dear, and we cannot allow it to go ignored. That's why I urge my colleagues to join me in support of the resolution condemning the actions of Governor Grisham for attempting to deprive the citizens of New Mexico of their right to bear arms. The people of this great country understand that the House Republican majority will always fight for their Second Amendment rights and uphold the Constitution. Mr. Speaker, I rise to recognize the Clark County High School women's soccer team for winning the Class II state title, the program's second state championship in 3 years. After working hard all season, the Eagles left it all on the field and defeated the Central of Wise County Warriors by a score of 7-0. These talented student athletes include Avery and Sydney Shineberry, Danielle Franz, McKenna Jarvis, Kelsey Elrod, Ivana Betancourt, Heather Cartagena, Bailey Mayo, Olivia Maurice, Summer and Madison Toon, Audrey Price, Campbell Naiman, Morgan Walker, Ella O'Donnell, Lily Suling, Tatiana Garcia, Kylie Goforth, Leah Mitchell, Krishna Miranda, and Noel Whalen. Throughout the final game, the team overcame challenges, displayed superior skill, and dominated possession of the ball. This was Coach Ray Hawkins' first year as head coach, and under his leadership, the coaches, players, and staff built up their confidence to achieve their goals, and they did just that. Congratulations again to the Clark County High School women's soccer team on this incredible achievement. Mr. Speaker, I rise to recognize Martha's Meals on Wheels in Stanton, Virginia, for 50 years of service to our local community. In 1973, Minister Joe Lotz of the Emmanuel Episcopal Church and Martha Wilkerson began preparing meals in the church to those in need for Stanton residents, and their efforts eventually became Martha's Meals on Wheels. 5 decades later, Martha's Meals on Wheels has gone from serving 20 people 5 days a week to now 30 to 35 people per day within the city limits with the help of Armstrong's Restaurant in Verona, which has been preparing the meals for 20 years. In 2019, the program fed 4,900 people, and last year fed 7,700 people. And with 60 to 80 dedicated volunteers today, the program is expected to feed 7,800 people this year. Martha's Meals on Wheels longevity stands as a testament to the civic spirit of the town and an example we should all follow, to always lend a helping hand to others. I thank Martha's Meals on Wheels and the volunteers for their selfless service and wish them many years of success to come. Mr. Speaker, I yield back.
Pursuant to Clause 12A of Rule 1, the chair declares the House in recess until noon today.
The House will be in order. The prayer will be offered by Chaplain Kibben.
Would you pray with me? Lord, on this day, grant us your wisdom, for who is wise and understanding among us? But your wisdom is pure, peaceable, gentle, willing to yield, and full of mercy. Enable us to show that in living a good life, free of envy and ambition, boastfulness or falsehood, all that we do in the course of our day is born of your wisdom. And in our discourse with one another, teach us to show love. May we harbor no hate in our hearts. May we not reprove our neighbor, lest we ourselves be found wanting. May we not take vengeance or bear a grudge, but instead love our neighbor as we love ourselves. In fact, may the love we first received from you abound more and more. Remind us that you call us to offer this love to one another in knowledge and discernment, so that we may perceive what is best in our service to you and to this country. May you be glorified as we offer this day and our prayers to you. Amen.
Amen. The chair has examined the journal of the last day's proceeding and announces to the House the approval thereof. Pursuant to Clause 1 of Rule 1, the journal stands approved. The Pledge of Allegiance will be led by the gentleman from Massachusetts, Mr. McGovern.
Please join with me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The chair will entertain up to 15 requests for 1-minute speeches on each side of the aisle. For what purpose does the gentleman from South Carolina seek recognition?
Consent to address the House for 1 minute, advise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Sadly, the world is in a conflict we did not choose between dictators with rule of gun opposing democracies with rule of law. War criminal Putin began the current murderous conflict, invading Ukraine in February 2022. Shocked to find out the Ukrainians courageously resisted, President Donald Trump provided Javelin missiles and tried to deter Putin with troops in Poland. Today, the West is united, with Sweden and Finland joining NATO as the European Union surpasses American aid for Ukraine. Simultaneously, the Chinese Communist Party denies Taiwan existence, and the regime in Tehran continues nuclear missile development to achieve death to Israel, death to America. Fellow dictators clearly see the conflict as dictator or democracy as North Korean Kim Jong-un joins Putin. Supporters of democracy must remain united, as there is no third side to achieve peace through strength. The choice is clear: dictators or democracy. In conclusion, God bless our troops who successfully protected America for 20 years as the global war on terrorism continues, moving from the Afghanistan safe haven to America with Biden's open borders. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. For what purpose does the gentleman from Massachusetts seek recognition? Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, we are 11 days away from a government shutdown, and the right wing of the Republican Party is busy fighting with the far right wing. The sham plan Republicans have cobbled together this week gets us nowhere closer to funding the government. It goes back on the bipartisan deal struck earlier this year and is dead on arrival in the Senate. And it shows where Republican priorities are. By imposing draconian cuts on domestic programs, their sham CR means massive cuts to programs people living in poverty, from everything from housing support to heating assistance to WIC benefits. Make no mistake, if we don't reject these cuts, and if we don't fully fund the Biden administration's $1.4 billion supplemental WIC request, eligible low-income people, primarily toddlers, preschoolers, and postpartum moms, could be turned away from food. I can't for the life of me think of a more rotten thing to do. Pregnant moms and their young families are counting on you. So let's drop the theatrics, come together, fully fund WIC, and work toward ending hunger now. I yield back my time.
Gentleman yields back. For what purpose does the gentleman from Pennsylvania seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, request unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute and to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to recognize Karen Al Krish of Center County for being named the 2023 National Distinguished Principal of the Year. An educator for 29 years, Principal Krish has served in her current role as principal at Marion Walker Elementary School in the Bellefonte Area School District since 2017. Previously, she was principal at Bellefonte Area Elementary School, principal and vice principal at the Bellefonte Area Middle School, and an assistant administrator for the Baltimore Area School District. She also taught vocational education at the secondary level for 6 years, specifically to high poverty students. Principal Krish encourages the staff and teachers at her school to expand opportunities for students, resulting in excellent representation at the annual reading competition, participation in the Bellefonte Reads, and raising nearly $10,000 per year for the Four Diamond Fund through the school's mini-thon. Outside of the classroom, Karen participates in the Polar Plunge each year to raise funds for the YMCA anti-hunger program, and she is a Pennsylvania Master Naturalist volunteering frequently for conservation and state park programs. Congratulations, Principal Krish, on this tremendous achievement. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back. For what purpose does the gentleman from California seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent for 1 minute to address the House for 1 minute to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I stand here today beyond frustrated by the crisis in veterans health care in my community. Right now, we have just 4 physicians and only 2 mental health clinicians trying to provide care for over 27,000 veterans in San Joaquin County. Veterans are waiting up to 90 days to even speak to a doctor or get something as simple as a prescription refilled. That's the longest wait time in the state of California, and frankly, it's a disgrace. One of our veterans recently had to have his leg amputated because he couldn't see a doctor to get his diabetes medication refilled. It's unacceptable. I know our local VA staff are doing everything they can, but now we need Secretary McDonough to step in and help. We need more doctors, and we need them now. I have petitions right here in my hand from veterans across our community begging for a response and an action plan from the Secretary and the VA. We need answers. These brave men and women fought and sacrificed for our country. The last thing that they need to do is fight for their health care right now. It's time to fix this. And I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. For what purpose does the gentlelady from Iowa seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute and revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentlelady is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today in support of my bipartisan bill to recognize today as National Stillbirth Prevention Day. There are 21,000 babies born stillborn in the U.S. each year, and the way I see it, that's 21,000 too many. 1 in 4 stillbirths are preventable. Every baby lost to stillbirth is a heartbreak that we can prevent. But amidst this grief, there is hope. And I am humbled to be joined today by women who have endured stillbirth. These women are some of the strongest people I have ever met. Out of their pain, they have found a purpose, preventing stillbirth and ensuring expecting moms have healthy pregnancies and healthy babies. The stillbirth rate in the U.S. is unacceptably high. By leveraging federal resources for evidence-based care, research, and education, we will save lives and save babies. We can and we must do more for moms and their babies, and together we can end the tragedy of stillbirth. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentlelady yields back. For what purpose does the gentlelady from Oregon seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I seek unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute and to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentlelady is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, as a proud Latina and the daughter of a Mexican immigrant, I rise in honor of Hispanic Heritage Month. September 15th kicked off a month of recognition, celebration, and reflection. We recognize the struggles and contributions of our community. We celebrate our ancestry and rich cultures, and we reflect on the sacrifices Latinos have made throughout history. Oregon's 6th District is home to a thriving Latino community. Each year, more Latinos are starting businesses, raising families, and putting down roots in our state. However, as our community grows, so does our need for representation. I'm honored to be one of the first Latinas to represent Oregon in Congress, but that is just the start. We must break down barriers and hold the doors of opportunity open for future generations of Latino leaders, because we deserve to have our voices heard wherever decisions are made, not just today, not just this month, but every single day of the year. Thank you, and I yield back.
The gentlelady yields back. The chair will remind all persons in the gallery that they are here as guests of the House and that any manifestation of approval or disapproval of proceedings or other audible conversation is in violation of the rules of the House. For what purpose does the gentleman from Alabama seek recognition? Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, last weekend more than 20,000 illegal immigrants crossed the U.S. southern border. President Biden's only solution to historically massive border numbers is to warn migrants not to come and to claim our border is secure. Meanwhile, the cities that the migrants end up in are forced to figure out where to house them and how to care for them. And the American taxpayer is footing that bill. So far this year, over $200 million of Chicago's $500 million budget deficit has gone to migrant care costs. New York City Mayor Eric Adams recently warned citizens that the cost of migrant care could mean cuts to the city's services due to a financial tsunami. The governor of Massachusetts has declared a state of emergency due to the onslaught. Leaders in sanctuary cities might have asked for this crisis by offering themselves up, but the American people did not. The United States is nearly $33 trillion in debt. Biden economics has caused a 17% inflation, and American people, 70% of them are now saying they are feeling financially stressed. But Biden still seems to think that taxpayers have millions to spend. Let me say this to the administration. You can either close our border or we'll close the government.
Gentleman's time has expired. For what purpose does the gentleman from North Carolina seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I ask for unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute to provide some extent.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, today I rise to honor an extraordinary individual whose legacy has left an unforgettable mark on Eastern North Carolina and the nation, Dr. Nicholas F. Roberts, Sr. Recently, we unveiled a historical marker, a testament of the remarkable life of Dr. Roberts, a man of significant influence. Dr. Roberts, a Shaw University alumnus, pastor, editor, and public servant, hailed from the town of Seaboard in Northampton County, North Carolina. His dedication to education, faith, and community service set a standard that still inspires us today. I am glad to add that Dr. Roberts is also the great-grandfather of my esteemed colleague, the gentleman from Virginia, Representative Bobby Scott. As we commemorate Dr. Roberts, let us reflect on the tremendous impact one individual can have on the community and a nation. His contributions are a guiding light, reminding us that our community is only as strong as its people, and our future is shaped by those who came before us. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. For what purpose does gentlelady from Illinois seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute and to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentlelady is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today as the proud representative of a congressional district in Illinois, a state committed to progress, justice, safety, and human rights. Yesterday, Illinois made history as the first state in the nation to eliminate cash bail, a standard used to punish poverty instead of upholding justice. A standard that kept those without means, especially Black and brown Illinoisans, in jail for months as they awaited trial, while letting slip those who could afford bail, independently of the crime that they were accused of. Some may say we're reforming our criminal justice system, but we are doing more than that.
I want to especially thank Senator Robert Peters, who led the efforts in Illinois' General Assembly. We, unlike other states, are creating a justice system that protects victims, ensures equal due process for everyone independent of their means. The Pretrial Fairness Act is a historic win for civil rights advocates across our nation, and it is time we, Congress, follow Illinois' lead towards progress. Thank you, Speaker, and I yield back.
Gentlelady's time has expired. The Chair lays before the House the following communication.
The Honorable the Speaker, House of Representatives, sir. This is to notify you formally, pursuant to Rule 8 of the Rules of the House of Representatives, that I, the Honorable Pramila Jayapal, U.S. Representative for the 7th Congressional District of Washington, have been served with a third-party subpoena to produce documents in the United States District Court for the Southern District of Georgia. After consultation with the Office of General Counsel, I have determined that only partial compliance with the subpoena is consistent with the privileges and rights of the House. Signed sincerely, Pramila Jayapal, Member of Congress.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Oklahoma seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, by direction of the Committee on Rules, I call up House Resolution 680 and ask for its immediate consideration.
The clerk will report the resolution.
House Calendar Number 33, House Resolution 680. Resolved that upon adoption of this resolution, it shall be in order to consider in the House the bill, H.R. 1435, to amend the Clean Air Act to prevent the elimination of the sale of internal combustion engines. All points of order against consideration of the bill are waived. The bill shall be considered as read. All points of order against provisions in the bill are waived. The previous question shall be considered as ordered on the bill and on any amendment thereto to final passage without intervening motion except one. 1 hour of debate equally divided and controlled by the chair and ranking minority member of the Committee on Energy and Commerce or their respective designees. And 2, 1 motion to recommit. Section 2. At any time after adoption of this resolution, the Speaker may, pursuant to Clause 2B of Rule 18, declare the House resolved into the Committee of the whole House on the State of the Union for consideration of the bill H.R. 4365, making appropriations for the Department of Defense for the fiscal year ending September 30th, 2024, and for other purposes. The first reading of the bill shall be dispensed with. All points of order against consideration of the bill are waived. General debate shall be confined to the bill and shall not exceed 1 hour, equally divided and controlled by the chair and ranking minority member of the Committee on Appropriations or their respective designees. After general debate, the bill shall be considered for amendment under the 5-minute rule. The bill shall be considered as read. All points of order against provisions in the bill are waived. Section 3A. No amendment to the bill shall be in order except those printed in the report of the Committee on Rules accompanying this resolution, amendments en bloc described in Section 4 of this resolution, and pro forma amendments described in Section 5 of this resolution. B. Each amendment printed in the report of the Committee on Rules shall be considered only in the order printed in the report, may be offered only by a member designated in the report, shall be considered as read, shall be debatable for the time specified in the report, equally divided and controlled by the proponent and opponent, shall not be subject to amendment except as provided by Section 5 of this resolution, and shall not be subject to a demand for division of the question in the House or in the Committee of the Whole. C. All points of order against amendments printed in the report of the Committee on Rules or against amendments en bloc described in Section 4 of this resolution are waived. Section 4. It shall be in order at any time for the chair of the Committee on Appropriations or her designee to offer amendments en bloc consisting of amendments printed in the report of the Committee on Rules accompanying this resolution, not earlier disposed of. Amendments en bloc offered pursuant to this section shall be considered as read, shall be debatable for 20 minutes, equally divided and controlled by the chair and ranking minority member of the Committee on Appropriations or their respective designees, shall not be subject to amendment except as provided by Section 5 of this resolution, and shall not be subject to a demand for division of the question in the House or in the Committee of the Whole. Section 5. During consideration of the bill for amendment, the chair and ranking minority member of the Committee on Appropriations or their respective designees may offer up to 10 pro forma amendments each at any point for the purpose of debate. Section 6. At the conclusion of consideration of the bill for amendment, the committee shall rise and report the bill to the House with such amendments as may have been adopted. The previous question shall be considered as ordered on the bill and amendments thereto to final passage without intervening motion, except one motion to recommit.
The gentleman from Oklahoma is recognized for 1 hour.
Mr. Speaker, for the purposes of debate only, I yield the customary 30 minutes to my very good friend, the gentlewoman from New Mexico, Ms. Ledger Fernandez, pending which I yield myself such time as I may consume. During consideration of this resolution, all time yielded is for the purpose of debate only. I ask unanimous consent that all members may have 5 legislative days in which to revise and extend their remarks on House Resolution 680.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, last week the Rules Committee met and reported out a rule, House Resolution 680, consideration of H.R. 4365, the Department of Defense Appropriations Act for fiscal year 2024 under a structured rule. It provides 1 hour of general debate, equally divided and controlled by the chair and ranking member of the Committee on Appropriations or their designees. It also makes and order 184 amendments, more than 75% of those eligible for consideration. Finally, it provides for a motion to recommit. I rise today in support of the rule and the underlying legislation. Mr. Speaker, our democracy remains a beacon of hope to the entire world. Billions of people across the globe look to the United States as a leader in freedom and liberty and as a protector of peace. From the very moment our nation was conceived, a strong national defense has been a differentiator for democracy. Essential to protecting the homeland, international order, and the American people from those who would seek to do us harm, we must never lose sight of the need to maintain a strong defense. Although our men and women in uniform give of themselves every day, they cannot do their jobs unless Congress does its job. Only Congress can provide the funding for our military needs to fulfill its duties. That's our responsibility, and today we move forward with that commitment as we take up H.R. 4365, the Department of Defense Appropriations Act for fiscal year 2024. We must do our duty and make sure that our brave military members can move forward with theirs. With evolving threats, we continue to face a struggle seen throughout time. The contest between freedom and tyranny is not far from us. From Vladimir Putin's unjust and illegal invasion of Ukraine, to China's posturing in the South China Sea, to continued threats posed by extremists and terrorists, hostile actors are looking for weakness. Yet America's armed forces remain ready to meet any challenge wherever it may arise. But continuing to meet those threats requires an appropriate investment of national resources. With today's measure, we fulfill that commitment and ensure that our armed forces will have the resources they need to meet any foe anywhere in the world at any time. The bill before us provides full funding for the national defense. It appropriates $826 billion in new discretionary spending, which is a modest increase of $300 million over the President's budget request and nearly $29 billion, or 3.6%, over fiscal year 2023 enacted levels. H.R. 4365 makes targeted investments that support critical priorities. Perhaps the most important of these priorities is to reinvest in our servicemen and women. The bill provides a 5.2% pay rise for our service members. For junior enlisted service members, we provide an historic pay increase of an average of 30%, ensuring that we not only offset the effects of President Biden's inflationary crisis for these younger and most junior service members, but also ensuring that we can retain service members who are at the beginning of their military careers. I'd be remiss, Mr. Speaker, not to give my good friend and fellow defense appropriator, Mike Garcia of California, credit for this particular measure, both in the appropriations bill and, frankly, in the NDAA as well. His work on behalf of younger service people has been exemplary, relentless, and effective. The bill also makes continued and necessary investments to ensure that we will continue to have the best equipped and best trained fighting force now and into the future. We fund continued expansion of the Navy, making sure that we will be able to continue to protect freedom of the seas around the globe, and fund development and acquisition of next-generation weapons systems. But it doesn't stop there, Mr. Speaker. H.R. 4365 also ensures that the Biden administration cannot continue to put politics ahead of national security. It preserves existing and long-standing bipartisan bans on taxpayer funding for abortions. It also ensures that federal dollars cannot be used to indoctrinate our troops with progressive ideology like critical race theory training, and instead assures that the Pentagon's focus is where it should be, on military readiness and preparedness so that our warfighters can defeat aggression and defend freedom anywhere in the world. All in all, there's much to like in today's bill, Mr. Speaker. I look forward to advancing this measure through a robust amendment process on the floor and onward to final passage. I urge members to support both the rule and the underlying legislation, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Oklahoma reserves. The gentlelady from New Mexico is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you so much, Chair Cole. I want to thank you for the dignity and respect that you show each of your colleagues on the Rules Committee, and it is a great honor to be debating this rule with you this morning. But I must, however, rise in opposition to the rule because we only have 6 legislative days left to fund the government, and we are considering only one of the 11 bills that we must pass to fully fund our federal government. I completely agree with our chair that our country is a beacon of hope and that we must indeed fund our military in the way that they need in order to continue to provide that beacon of hope and that strength that we must communicate both to our allies and those who would do us harm. Indeed, America is facing significant security threats from a rampaging Russia, the Chinese Communist Party, a soon-to-be nuclear North Korea. Instead of uniting us, however, against those very real threats, extreme MAGA Republicans are putting Americans at war with each other with this divisive defense appropriation bills. Extreme MAGA Republicans are weakening our military readiness. In the Senate, Republicans are refusing to allow votes on flag officers, so we don't have the generals, admirals, and top military officers we need to lead our troops. Here in the House, instead of passing what should be and has historically been a bipartisan defense appropriations bills, extreme Republicans are inserting the kitchen sink of culture war issues that we have seen too often. Indeed, when we talk about women, this bill is another step in their march toward a national abortion ban. If this bill is enacted, a servicewoman in a state with a total abortion ban that doesn't have exceptions for rape would not be able to take leave and get help to travel to a place like New Mexico, where a woman's right to receive the full access to reproductive health care is honored. 14 states have a total ban on abortion. In each of those 14 states, we will find servicewomen who are honorably serving our nation. In addition, this bill sets up minorities and our service members who are gay, lesbian, and all individuals of the LGBTQ community to harassment. At a moment when we know that some of our bases are under threat from climate change, this bill cuts $714 million from climate resiliency programs. I have been to our bases in the Pacific Islands, and I recognize that we must have climate resilience if we don't want our bases to be underwater. By giving up on preparing for climate resiliency, we are giving up a strategic military advantage that we should take advantage of. Instead of focusing on how we can improve recruitment from our diverse communities in America, when we are failing to meet our recruitment goals, this appropriations prohibits funding for diversity, equity, inclusion, accessibility. We know that people of color answer the call to service at disproportionate higher rates, and those numbers are not reflected in military leadership. This bill tells my Latino and Native American communities, you are not valued. Congressman Neguse asked the Defense Appropriations Chair why he would cut funding for the Chief Diversity Officer, a position that he had voted to create. The chair responded that it was the best way to get attention. That's how we legislate now? To get attention? Last week in the Rules Committee, we tried to remedy some of these awful and unnecessary riders. Republicans voted our amendments down. All of these divisive riders harm our military readiness, and they hurt our service members who put their lives on the line to protect us. It's never enough to just thank our service members for their service. We need to provide them with the benefits, quality of life, and respect, the respect that all of them deserve. These extreme provisions are a trend this year, however. Perhaps that's the reason why we only passed one appropriations bill under Republican leadership in the House this year. This defense appropriations bill is the only one that we appear to be considering today. We are not considering a short-term funding package to make sure our government doesn't shut down. We are not considering something to cover all of the appropriations bills. But today we are considering this defense appropriation bills, and it should be focused solely on national security. It should be about making our nation has the best and brightest force. And it should be about serving all of the individuals that protect us. We should be unified in making sure our service members have the resources they need and the respect they deserve. Instead, this bill attacks access to reproductive health care for our servicewomen and their families. It devalues the minorities, the Latinos, Black Americans, Native Americans who serve and are looking for us to help them address the racism that still exists, unfortunately. So I urge my colleagues to oppose this rule. And with that, I reserve.
The gentlelady reserves. The gentleman from Oklahoma is recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I yield myself such time as I may consume. And I want to begin by returning my deep respect, returning a deep regard for my good friend from New Mexico. It's been a delight to have her on the Rules Committee, and we've found a lot of common ground working together on Native American issues where, frankly, she's an acknowledged national expert. So I look forward to a long and good relationship with my friend. When it comes to this rule and this bill, obviously we have disagreements. Let me talk first about the point my friend makes about timing and how many bills have gotten done and where we are in the process. There's actually a great deal I agree with her on that. Sadly, we ought to also remember the Democratic Congress of last year didn't finish the appropriations process until December. And if you looked at it the year before, it didn't finish it until March in the next year after the end of the fiscal year. So being late around here is not new for either party. But our friends set the standard last time, I think. We'll see how we end up. My friend made a comment that we'd only done one bill. I like to say, well, that's one more than the Democratic United States Senate has managed to do. The reality is, Senate didn't produce under Democratic control any bills for the last 2 years. None out of subcommittee, none out of full committee, none across the floor. So, we're dealing with a very difficult, body on the other side of the rotunda. These timing issues, hopefully we can all get better at this, work together. I actually think we have something this year in the debt ceiling agreement that will be helpful in that regard. The reality is, if we don't get our work done by January 1st, which is about the time Democrats got their work done last year, we'll have a year-long CR with a 1% across-the-board cut. I don't know any appropriator on either side of the aisle that wants to see that happen. And I don't think most people that care deeply about the defense of the United States does. So we have some forcing mechanisms in place. Hopefully we'll continue to make some better progress there. In terms of my friend's point about divisive social policy, I would like to just point out where this started. It's the executive branch that made decisions to do things much differently than we've done them before, and usually with no consultation with the Congress of the United States. Most of the things my friend disagrees with, we consider correctives of executive overreach, including violation of the Hyde Amendment, which is essentially, in my view, what the Department of Defense has decided on its own to do without discussion or consultation with the Congress of the United States. That's unfortunate. That's something hopefully we can work through and resolve in the months ahead. I also would say, we're just very different in terms of where we think the focus ought to be. This bill focuses on weapons acquisition, training, and readiness. We live in a very dangerous world. And we think there's a big difference, for instance, between climate resilience and actively pushing climate change legislation, which we believe the original administration budget does. We want to refocus on the things that we think matter. We're not going to beat our adversaries if, God forbid, we find ourselves in a contest with any of them, if our forces aren't well trained, aren't well armed, and aren't well prepared for the challenges they're going to face. That should be the main focus of the Department of Defense. We think the administration has lost its focus. We see this bill as a useful corrective. Finally, I point out to my friends on both sides of the aisle, quite frankly, whatever we pass, we're going to sit down and negotiate with the United States Senate and with the President of the United States. As my friends know, the Democrats control the United States Senate, and we have a Democrat as the President of the United States. So wherever we end up, it's going to be a process of give and take and discussion. But it's important that the House have an opening position. And last point to make on this, if we get this bill across the floor, and I do say if, because there's some controversy about whether or not we'll make it, even on our own side, even though nobody over here disagrees with the rule or disagrees with the bill. They have other points sometimes they want to make. Sadly, shouldn't be at this bill. But my friends never got the defense bill across the floor when they were in the majority by themselves. There were too many divisions and splits within their caucus to even bring it to the floor. If we manage to get this bill across the floor, we'll actually, in that single action, have moved across the floor a larger percentage of the discretionary budget of the United States than my friends were ever able to do when they were in the majority. So it's a complex bill. It's half the discretionary spending of the United States, over half. There's lots of areas and flashpoints where we disagree, but it's important we continue the dialogue and the motion forward. I think we have the opportunity in passing the rule and the underlying legislation to do that today, and I would urge my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to vote accordingly. With that, Mr. Speaker, I reserve my time.
Gentleman from Oklahoma reserves. The gentlelady from New Mexico is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I am also thinking back about last week's committee hearing and this discussion about the history of where we were with regards to the appropriations process. I think there's a very different mood this year than we had in last cycle, and that is the fact that Democrats have never called to shut it down. And that's exactly what we are hearing from Republicans on the other side of the aisle. We never took that position. We were always trying to work it out, not shut it down. So even though we might not have passed all the bills by September 30th, what we were doing, we were working across the aisle with our colleagues We were working with the Senate on the other side, and so we never had a shutdown. What we had was a constant movement towards an agreement, and indeed the appropriations bills that passed with overwhelming bipartisan support, both in the Senate and the House. We had hundreds of Republicans voting with the Democrats to pass the last appropriations bills. I would now like to yield 2 minutes to the ranking member of the Rules Committee, our good friend and those we hold in high regard, the gentleman from Massachusetts, Mr. McGovern.
Well, thank you very much.
The gentleman is recognized for 2
minutes.
minutes.
Thank you for yielding. Mr. Speaker, I rise in support of a bipartisan amendment that is made in order and will be offered by Representative Gates and Jacobs to prohibit the transfer of cluster munitions. Since 2009, the United States has refused to use, produce, transfer, or sell cluster munitions. And as a nation, we could take pride in this decision. Cluster munitions are indiscriminate weapons. They explode when touched by a soldier, a farmer, or a child. They contaminate an entire field of combat, and they remain a deadly threat long past the end of a conflict. Rain and other events can move them from where they first landed to who knows where. And yet, the Biden administration recently chose to send cluster munitions to Ukraine. I condemn Russia's use of cluster munitions against Ukraine, but two evils do not add up to a greater good. The United States should not have provided cluster munitions to Ukraine, and this amendment is necessary to ensure such a transfer does not happen again. I also support this amendment because it is not specific to Ukraine. Now that the United States has opened the door to using cluster munitions, we have no idea where else the U.S. might decide to send them. Mr. Speaker, an international treaty exists to ban cluster munitions. 112 countries have ratified the Convention on Cluster Munitions since May 2008, and 12 more have signed. Nigeria ratified the convention on February 28th, and South Sudan did so on August 3rd. The United States and Russia are not parties to the treaty. And now each of us has brought these terrible weapons into play inside Ukraine. Mr. Speaker, the only thing that can undermine the ban on cluster munitions is the willingness of governments to use or transfer these terrible, indiscriminate weapons. And I urge my colleagues to support the Gates-Jacobs amendment and prohibit the United States from any further transfers of cluster munitions. I yield back.
Gentleman yields. Gentlelady from New Mexico reserves. Gentleman from Oklahoma is recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I yield myself such time as I may consume. I want to both agree and disagree with my good friend from New Mexico about shutting down the government. I personally could not agree more with you. I think it's a dumb thing to do. I think it's a dangerous thing to do. I've never favored shutting down the government. I've argued against it. The tactic doesn't work. I think it won't work this time. The American people expect us to keep the essential services of government going while we negotiate and get to a final solution. I will correct my friend on one thing. The Democrats have shut down the government. Frankly, they shut it down over DACA in 2017. Now, I always hand the Democrats this. When they shut it down, they do something stupid. They're pretty quick to realize it, and they backed off. I think they shut it down on a Friday and reopened it on a Monday. But they did indeed shut it down. It's just simply an inappropriate tool in the toolbox, in my agreement. I see both sides use it. My side, sadly, has used it more. I hope we don't do it this time. Certainly, the great majority of our members and the Speaker do not want to see a shutdown, and I think they've made that apparent over and over again. I hadn't particularly intended to comment on my good friend, the ranking member's amendment, because I know how passionately he feels about this, and I respect those feelings, and honestly, I respect the feelings of all those who hold that view. I find myself in the unusual position of agreeing with President Biden when my good friend, the ranking member, is disagreeing with him. And that shows it's not really a partisan issue. I think it is an issue of judgment. I have no doubt the President of the United States agonized before making this decision. It was clearly a decision he did not want to make. But I think he was compelled by two factors that probably decided the case for him, although I don't presume to speak for the President. But number one, we ought to always remember the enemies of Ukraine, Russia, on the other side introduced these weapons first and were using those weapons indiscriminately. Second, Ukraine is using these weapons in defense of its own territory and its own people in its own territory. That's not what the Russians are doing. They're aggressively on the other side using this in another country. Finally, just to, again, be fair with the president's dilemmas, we've used an extraordinary amount of ammunition trying to support the Ukraine, and I think we have some strains on our own stockpiles, and I suspect that was part of the decision making. But when you're in a war, you're in it to win it. And frankly, it was not the Ukrainians or the Americans that introduced this first. It was not the Ukrainians or the Americans or our European allies, who were there in vast numbers, that started this conflict. It's to the advantage of all that it end as quickly as it can. The level of casualties here on both sides is horrific. But the person that bears responsibility is Vladimir Putin. And frankly, the country that is the aggressor is the Russians. And I'm not going to begrudge the Ukrainians for them getting what they need. And as critical as I can sometimes be of President Biden, I will certainly not criticize him in this case, because I think in this case he reluctantly made a tough decision he probably didn't want to make, but I think he made it for the right reasons, and therefore I won't be supporting my friend's amendment later on today. Although, again, I'm glad we were able to make it in order. I think it's an important issue for us to discuss, and I look forward to a very vigorous debate on that later this afternoon. With that, Mr. Speaker, I reserve my time.
Gentleman from Oklahoma reserves. The gentlelady from New Mexico is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, as we just noted, the chair of the committee has once again shown both his dignity and respect to his colleagues. I do want to point out that you're right. I did forget about that 72-hour shutdown, because it was very brief. And it is not something, I agree with you, it's a stupid thing to do. No, I'm sorry, I think you said it's a dumb thing to do. Because it causes so much pain to the people back home. They expect us to do our job. And the primary thing we're supposed to do is fund our government, because it is not just the really hard-working employees who keep our airplanes flying in the air, who make sure that our food is inspected so we don't get sick. It is also the teachers in our schools who receive Title I funding in New Mexico. So many of my schools receive Title I funding. Those are the schools that have the fewest resources. So the federal government helps them out to make sure that all our children, wherever they live, can get a good education. Those are the things that will be lost if we shut down the federal government. I want to point out that in contrast to the 72 hours, in 1995, under Republican leadership, 21 days the government was shut down. In 2013, 16 days, and then in 2018, they shut it down for 35 days. This is a refrain we hear over and over again. It happens under House Republican leadership so often, as we just saw. Mr. Speaker, I want to yield 2 minutes to the gentlewoman from Oregon, and she is a wonderful member of our freshman class this year, Ms. Salinas.
The gentlelady from Oregon is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you to my good colleague from New Mexico for her leadership and for yielding me some time. Mr. Speaker, each year, hundreds of Oregonians die after overdosing on fentanyl. This drug has torn communities apart from Salem to Sheridan and everywhere in between. And it's not just our state, it is all across the U.S. Fentanyl and other synthetic opioids account for more than 85% of all opioid-involved deaths in the U.S. This is an issue that harms all of us, and I think members of both parties can agree that stemming the flow of these drugs into our communities is a bipartisan imperative. The appropriations process is one of our best opportunities to deliver critical funding to the organizations and agencies on the front line of this fentanyl fight. Yet sadly, this process has been needlessly politicized by far-right politicians who would rather notch political victories than policy ones. And this shameful defense appropriations bill is a prime example of that. By attaching anti-LGBTQ 2SIA+ and anti-choice writers to this bill, extremists in this body have turned what should be a straightforward funding package into a political wedge issue. That needless politicization is especially concerning given that this piece of legislation contains that critical funding to stop the flow of fentanyl in our country. Mr. Speaker, we cannot afford to let politics stand in the way of our fight against the fentanyl epidemic. And as a new member of this esteemed body, I did not come here for political gamesmanship. We should all be prioritizing people over partisanship. This is an all-hands-on-deck emergency, and I urge my colleagues to dispense with their partisan antics and focus on passing government funding legislation that meets the moment and delivers for all of our communities. Thank you, and I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. Gentlelady from New Mexico reserves. The gentleman from Oklahoma is recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And again, I want to thank my good friends. There are some areas that we agree, some areas we disagree. Nobody disagrees on the importance of the fentanyl crisis and the importance of dealing in any way we can, through whatever means we have, with those who engage in trafficking that illegal drug that has killed tens of thousands of Americans. Quite frankly, I suspect later this week or next week, we'll give our friends the opportunity to work with us on Homeland Security measures that'll deal with just that. I mean, I would point to, frankly, the abject failure of the Biden administration to defend the southern border, the green light that's been put out there as a huge cause for this massive influx of drugs into our own country. We passed H.R. 2 on this floor, Mr. Speaker, to try and deal with that. And we're going to provide our friends with some opportunities where maybe we can find some common ground. You can be pro-immigration and pro-border security at the same time. I think this administration has had a hard time doing that. And quite frankly, most of the policies that it reversed, whether it was building the wall or remain in Mexico from the last administration, were effective. You can tell by the record numbers of illegal entries we have, the record amount of trafficking we have in drugs, and sadly in human beings across the border, to know that the Biden border policy, which my friends have supported, has been a disaster. And it's one that, again, we hope they not only recognize that disaster, but will work with it to correct some of those measures. Finally, again, I'm going to agree with my friend from New Mexico. I don't believe in shutting down the government. I know that we occasionally have some people who do. The reality is it's a very small number, but it can be a very influential number in a House that's very narrowly divided. So we're going to provide some opportunities, both to our own members and to our colleagues on the other side, to avoid that and to negotiate in good faith. Again, I just reiterate my point where I know my friend and I agree. It's not an appropriate tool. It does not work. And I would hope that we can avoid that. But we also need to sit down and work together where we can. And there's a lot of areas in this bill that we can work on. Last point I will make, and my friends talk about the conflicts that we have in the defense bill. Remember, we had a conflict in the last Congress, and my friends in the House tried to unilaterally overturn the Hyde language, a bipartisan agreement that goes all the way back to 1975 or 6, as I recall, Mr. Speaker. And when that was struck, there were less than 150 Republicans in the House, so it was genuinely bipartisan. It wasn't something we crammed down. My friends have changed their mind over the issue of using federal dollars for abortion over the years. We have not changed our position. And we were able to beat that back even when we were in the minority, because at the end of the day, they couldn't pass the bills without Republican support. I think the administration has tried to go around Congress in this case and use federal dollars without congressional consent to facilitate abortion, other than in cases where we're talking about rape, incest, or the life of the mother. We have no debate over the appropriate use of federal dollars in those cases. We do in others. Doesn't mean people can't travel, you can't give leave. We just shouldn't be using federal dollars in this area. That's a long-standing principle that I would argue the Biden administration is trying to subvert. By the way, it's a principle that President Biden until 2019 when he was running for president, accepted throughout his entire career. He was a champion of that until 2019 when his own party had moved so far left he had to change his longstanding position in pursuit of the nomination. Again, this is politics. People are allowed to do what they want. But please don't chastise us for being consistent with a position we assumed in 1975 and have not changed. It's our friends who've changed their mind on this issue, and frankly, it's the administration that tried to subvert the will and the authority of Congress by moving around it. With that, Mr. Speaker, I reserve my time.
Gentleman from Oklahoma reserves. The gentlelady from New Mexico is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The concern that we have with the bill with regards to women's rights to be able to determine herself in conversation with her own faith, her own family, and her own doctors, what kind of reproductive health care she wants access to, is the fact that this bill would prevent service women and their families from taking paid leave or traveling to obtain an abortion or related services if those services are not provided where she is assigned. Remember, servicewomen don't get to choose where they live and where they work. There has already been multiple legal opinions that using paid leave and traveling and getting assistance to get to a state where you can get medical care does not violate the Hyde Amendment. Indeed, the Hyde Amendment would allow you to get that kind of care if you were raped. Well, guess what? In 14 states, if you were raped, you cannot get that care. So that would violate the Hyde Amendment in a sense when you cannot get access to it. Last week in Rules, Representative McCollum told the story of a woman in Texas who was told by her doctor that she would not perform a surgical procedure to remove a dead fetus because of the state's abortion ban. That servicewoman did not have the options she was entitled to. And Mr. Speaker, I would like to ask unanimous consent to enter into the record the 2023 New York Times article, "As Abortion Laws Drive Obstetricians from Red States, Maternity Care Suffers." So because what has changed...
Without objection.
Because what has changed, that now we have 14 states that have total bans on abortion, we must do more to honor our commitment to our servicewomen. Mr. Speaker, I yield 2 minutes to the gentlewoman from Texas, Ms. Jackson Lee.
The gentlelady from Texas is recognized.
I thank the gentlelady. It is a question, Mr. Speaker, of readiness. That is what we believe in. That is what a defense appropriations bill is. It is grounded in the readiness of the most powerful armed forces in the world. It is to ensure that they are ready. And unfortunately, the defense appropriations of which we are being forced to put on the floor today by the majority, it is unbelievable that they would cut vital civilian positions when the department is struggling to meet its readiness goals. Civilians are a crucial part of ensuring that our men and women, our combat soldiers, are ready to serve around the world. It is hateful policies that want to undermine and attack the LGBTQ+ community who have served in valor. We know them well. They have served without question. They have worn the uniform without question. It is to stop a logistical provision that has nothing to do with abortion. It is to allow for that military person to receive reproductive medical services, which may come to be in many different facets, to ensure that someone is able to ensure the reproductive life that they may desire to have. And of course, how ludicrous it is in this emerging, wonderful, diverse nation that many look to as a place and a bastion of freedom, that we would eliminate funding for diversity, equity, and inclusion, that we'd eliminate climate change to ensure that our vehicles are well equipped for the new generation, that we would ensure, again, that our personnel, our families, cannot get the medical care that they desire. Mr. Speaker, what have we done in years past? We have provided a defense appropriations to be able to support our military. We now have a bill on the floor that is undermining our military. I'm saddened by this. I'm grateful for the triple negative amendment that has been allowed to be in to provide breast cancer, and I look forward to that amendment. I yield back.
Gentlelady from New Mexico reserves.
Reserve.
Gentleman from Oklahoma is recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I yield myself such time as I may consume. And nobody's arguing against diversity in the military. American military has actually usually been the leader in this area, whether it was desegregation or certainly addressing the inequities between men and women. And we haven't gotten it right, but I think broadly it's worked in the right direction and quite often ahead of the rest of society. The real problem here is we want to focus on training and weapons, not on culture wars. And we think the administration has gone around Congress in some cases, the Hyde Amendment being one of them. My friends have their lawyers. We have our lawyers. I guess they'll go to court and sort that out. But there wasn't any consultation with the Congress, any discussion on this. That was a decision made unilaterally by the administration. I think Congress has every right to be consulted. They don't have money by their own right in the executive branch. They have what we give them for the purposes that are specified by the Congress of the United States. They don't get to just make it up on their own. And I know there was at least some discussion back and forth where people warned, don't open this door without a discussion and without green light from Congress. That didn't occur, and so we're in this discussion. Now, over the course of reaching a bill, I suspect we'll find some sort of solution or work it through one way or the other. I hope we do, because I don't think anything is more important in what I think is a very dangerous world than equipping, training, and preparing the men and women who protect us all. On that, we have a lot more common ground than division. But again, I think this was a choice by the administration. It provoked a response by Congress. We'll try to work it through by normal legislative means and see where we end up. With that, Mr. Speaker, I'll reserve my time.
Gentleman from Oklahoma reserves. The gentlelady from New Mexico is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I yield 3 minutes to the gentlewoman from Virginia, Ms. McClellan.
The gentlelady is recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to follow up on the negative impact that the restrictions on funding for travel to receive abortion services will have on our service members and their families, women of childbearing years. Unfortunately, in the South, between New Mexico and Virginia, you have a ban on abortion, in some cases total, in some cases there are exceptions for rape or the life of the mother, but the mother's life has to be on the verge of death. And unfortunately, in these states, they make no distinction between miscarriage management, and they apply to cases like you heard where there has been fetal demise and a miscarriage. And if you do not remove the fetal tissue, then the mother can go septic and die. Or if she loses her amniotic fluid and you do not terminate that pregnancy, she can go septic and die. With the Hyde Amendment, and I represent a state that has over 170,000 federal employees and 130,000 active duty military personnel. With the Hyde Amendment in place, we are already telling pregnant people in that situation, you have to pay for that service yourself because their insurance won't pay for it. Many hospitals will consider them uninsured, won't let them have those procedures in the hospital. So they have to go find a clinic, which in many cases is getting harder. And now if they're in a state that has banned abortion in that situation, they've got to, on top of that, pay to travel somewhere where they can get, in some cases, life-saving care. And we have seen that these abortion bans have led to fewer OBGYNs in those states. So how are we going to recruit women of childbearing years when we say to them, if you get the worst news ever in your life, that you have suffered a miscarriage, or you have to choose between your life or continuing a pregnancy, when you're already willing to make the ultimate sacrifice to keep this country safe, you're on your own. And that is what this bill with that amendment will do. Our servicemen and women deserve better. This will lead in a country that already has an atrocious maternal mortality rate to even more maternal deaths. I don't know how we're going to recruit the women that we need, and I don't have enough time to talk about how the anti-DEI amendments will make it harder to recruit a service force that is as fully diverse as the country they serve. But this amendment in particular will be dangerous for our military service women or the families of our servicemen. And that's why I ask that we vote against the rule. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Gentlelady yields back. The
Reserve.
gentlelady from New Mexico reserves. The gentleman from Oklahoma is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I reserve my time at this moment.
Gentleman reserves. Gentlelady from New Mexico is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I have the great honor of yielding 3 minutes to the gentleman from Massachusetts, our ranking member on the Rules Committee.
Gentleman from Massachusetts
Mr.
is
McGovern.
recognized for 3 minutes.
I thank the gentlelady for yielding so I can vent a little bit. I just saw a roll call story that is reporting that Republicans are pulling their continuing resolution today to weigh more cuts. I mean, are you kidding me? Their crummy CR contained an 8% across-the-board cut in almost every program that helps people. Everything from, medical research, WIC, Head Start, housing, even border security is cut by 8%. The only thing that's exempt is the military budget, the biggest bureaucracy in our government. They're okay with cutting fuel assistance for poor people by 65%. I mean, money to help people able to heat their homes in the winter. They're okay with cutting that, but believe you can't find 1 penny in savings in a missile system in the Pentagon with huge cost overruns. I mean, it is pathetic. As the Republican whip said, the patients are running the hospital around here. The gentleman from Oklahoma said this is about a negotiation. My Republican friends can't even negotiate with themselves. And we have 11 days to go before there is a shutdown, and they are going in the wrong direction. It is going to become more and more difficult to get to an agreement. So enough. I mean, enough. The Republican leadership of this House is incompetent. I mean, they're so incompetent it takes my breath away. They're letting the clowns run the circus. It is time the Speaker of the House develop a spine and stand up to the most extreme elements on the Republican side and actually sit down and negotiate an agreement that deals with the reality of our government. The Republicans only control barely just one branch of our government. The House. The Senate's under Democratic control. The White House is run by a Democrat. You're going to have to negotiate. And you're moving in the wrong direction. Time is running out. Stop this nonsense. Get serious. Get to the negotiating table. Enough of this. I thank the gentlelady.
Gentleman yields back. The gentlelady from New Mexico reserves. The gentleman from Oklahoma is recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I have great affection and respect for my friend, the ranking member, and formerly the chairman of the full Rules Committee. But I'll start where I began this debate. Remember, my friends, you didn't finish the appropriations process on your side until December of last year, and you controlled all 3 parts of government. You had the Senate, you had the House, you had the presidency. Didn't get done until December. The year before that, you didn't get done until March of the year after the deal. So I wish the process went easier and smoother as well, but I don't think it goes much differently regardless of who happens to be in control. I do think that we're trying to make some progress here. Now, my friends are worried about what's cut. They ought to worry about what was spent. We're running a $1.7 trillion deficit. That deficit is bigger than the entire discretionary budget of the United States of America. Not bigger than the defense budget. It is bigger than everything. And it got a lot worse when my friends controlled the executive branch and both houses of Congress. I mean, you did over $3 trillion worth of spending outside the normal appropriation process. $1.9 trillion for an unneeded American Rescue Plan when we were coming out of COVID. roughly $700 billion from the much misnamed Inflation Reduction Act, which even the president now says was misnamed because it really had to do more with climate change. That was money we didn't have, money that fueled inflation, that made life worse for every single American. That didn't even get to like the knockoffs, like transportation bills that don't pay for themselves. I'd voted for every other major transportation agreement in my time here, 2 of them under President Obama. But they paid for themselves, either through gasoline taxes or ticket fees, what have you. You guys said, no, we got $1 trillion here, but it's not enough. We'll just throw another several $100 billion on in debt. We're paying for that now. So I'm not going to be critical of my party for trying to push down some of the spending. $1.7 trillion this year. Now and you guys can't find anywhere to cut. Now you want to talk about defense? I am happy to talk about defense. You know, my dad was a career non-commissioned officer at the height of the Cold War. You know what we spent on defense then? 50% of the federal budget, 9% of the GDP. You know what we spent during the great Reagan buildup? 6% of the GDP, about 1/3 of the federal budget. You know what we spend today? About 3% of the GDP and about 15% of the budget. Believe me, there's been an explosion of domestic spending over the decades, largely driven by my friends, and unsustainable. Unsustainable. We cannot stay on the path we were on. So we can argue about this or that. I would hope someday we actually get down. I have a bill I'd invite my friend to look at, try and go back and do with Social Security what we did in 1983 on a bipartisan basis. But we need to start getting the spending under control. The spending that is driving us out of balance is largely not in the Pentagon. It is largely in entitlement spending, which both sides, I would be the first to say, both sides have been reluctant to deal with. Neither of the last 2 presidents have been willing. This president actually voted for, a Social Security Commission that reformed and stabilized it when he was a senator. Now the White House rules these things out. Say, no, we can't can't do it. By the way, his predecessor is exactly the same. So Republican and Democrat alike. So I would love to be more restrained in the spending, and I think that's what my colleagues, even when I don't always agree with the tactics they use, are trying to do. They are motivated in the right direction, which is to deal with a $1.7 trillion deficit. We're trying to make some appropriate decisions there. Again, we work a legislative process, and I remind my friends they control 2/3 of it. And by the way, the defense bill last year, which was passed almost exclusively with Democratic votes, the Omni, to be fair, actually had a larger increase in the defense budget that my friends pushed, $45 billion. I actually agree with that, by the way, than this year, where we're basically at the president's number. So, we can all play this game with numbers and what have you. Let's try to work toward a deal, and I think we can get there, but I don't have any illusions it'll be easy along the way, and I certainly have seen both sides make missteps, in my view, in handling these situations over the years. I hope we don't do that again. With that, Mr. Speaker, I reserve my time.
The gentleman from Oklahoma reserves. The gentlelady from New Mexico is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I think what Americans know is that for too long, Republicans have been protecting the rich and the corporations who do not pay their taxes. And when we start talking about spending, we need to talk about what we're spending that money for. Democrats are investing in rural America. They are investing in our children. They are investing in our infrastructure. And what are Republicans doing? Yes, they are adding to that deficit. Republicans put $2 trillion on that credit card in tax cuts for the rich. The leader they worship, Donald Trump, put $7.5 trillion onto that deficit. The very first bill they brought to the floor of this Congress, what did it add? $114 billion to that cut. So that's what we need to talk about, is not just how they want to cut investments and important things like heating for our families who need it, our seniors, our veterans, but what are they doing? They're trying to make sure that they don't have to tax The rich and wealthy corporations, many, as we heard last night, don't pay anything in taxes. And yes, we do want to talk about Social Security. I am so glad that the chair brought this up because, Mr. Speaker, Republicans often swear that they're not going to cut Social Security and Medicare. Well, last night, when we met on the continuing resolution, there is an 8% cut across the board for everything but defense and veterans. Their continuing resolution has a 66% cut to heating assistance. They have said border security is their top priority, but the very CR we are scheduled to consider cuts funding for the Department for DHS by over 8%. So while they claim they won't cut Social Security and Medicare, their own continuing resolution, the language in the bill itself, demonstrates that nothing is sacred to them. So I'm going to offer my friends, my dear friends, a chance to show the American people that they are serious about preserving Social Security and Medicare. If we defeat the previous question, I urge you all to join us in defeating the previous question. I will offer an amendment to the rule to provide for consideration of a resolution which plainly states that the People's House won't cut a single cent from these crucial programs that so many of my constituents, so many of your constituents rely on. Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to insert into the text of my amendment into the record, along with any extraneous material immediately prior to the vote on the previous question. Mr. Speaker,
without objection.
To discuss our proposal, I yield 1 minute to the gentleman from California, Mr. Mullins.
Gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I rise in strong opposition to the majority's manufactured shutdown threat. For this reason, I ask my colleagues to defeat the previous question so we can bring up legislation that commits to protecting vital programs like Social Security. Our most vulnerable communities will suffer as a result of this short-sighted attempt to hold our most important federal programs hostage. For example, my California Bay Area district is home to over 127,000 senior citizens, many of whom rely on Social Security. Under a Republican shutdown, new applicants to the Social Security program wouldn't be able to enroll in this bedrock American program. While Social Security payments would continue during a shutdown, seniors would experience even more delays and lengthy phone queues when contacting the Social Security Administration. Many seniors already struggle to find help, and a Republican shutdown would only exacerbate this problem. MAGA Republicans are playing roulette with essential constituent services and creating yet another manufactured crisis. I urge the majority to bring a serious bipartisan proposal to the table to prevent this avoidable crisis, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Reserve.
The gentleman from Oklahoma is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I reserve my time.
The gentleman reserves.
Mr. Speaker, I think what we need
Gentlelady from New Mexico is recognized.
Sorry. Mr. Speaker, I think what we need to do is look at this appropriations bill, look at where we're at in our discussions about funding the government, and recognize that nothing exists in a vacuum. Last night, as we were talking about the Appropriations Committee, we were talking about the extreme cuts that are being made. And we know that our military, when they sort of show up at our bases, they're not showing up at a base that is not connected to the rest of the places they live in. In Clovis, New Mexico, where we have the Cannon Air Force Base, in Alamogordo, where we have an Air Force Base, those communities are connected. And we need to recognize that the other bills that they're looking at are going to cut funding in a way that's going to hurt our readiness. The Agricultural Appropriations Bill is a good opportunity to talk about this. The bill that they have brought forward would fund world development programs. No, that's going to get cut. It would also cut nutrition to women, infants, and children. It would cut the funding we need for our ranchers and farmers. Indeed, the cuts that they are proposing would be $8 billion of cuts in the Ag Appropriations Bill. This would bring the funding level for the Ag Appropriations Bill to a level not seen since 2000. 2007. The bill would cut broadband programs by 23%. It would hurt something that's incredibly important to my district, which are rural electric co-ops that serve 268,403 residents. Well, those electric rural co-ops, they serve people throughout our districts, and they serve our military bases. We must fight these kinds of threats. And with that, I reserve.
Gentlelady reserves. The gentleman from Oklahoma is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I continue to reserve my time.
The gentleman reserves.
Mr. Chairman, are you ready to close?
I'm prepared to close whenever my friend is.
Mr. Speaker.
The gentlelady from New Mexico is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, we cannot talk about readiness. We cannot talk about what we need to do in this country to support our military if we don't talk about our service members and what we must do to protect them and to respect them, because they are protecting us. And so when we are talking about our servicewomen, we must remember the number of servicewomen who are serving. It is about 20% right now. And the number of women who are serving in those 14 states which have a total ban on abortion is significant. It is 80,000 women. 80,000 women who, if something happens to them like what Representative McClellan discussed, they could die of sepsis. For those of us who have given birth, for those of us who have had to make really difficult decisions about our health and how we are going to do with complications of pregnancy, we feel it viscerally because we know that it is such a wonderful thing to give birth, but it's such a dangerous thing to be pregnant. And what they would do to our servicewomen is deny them the ability to go to a state like New Mexico when they want reproductive health care services.
Gentlelady's time has expired. The gentleman from Oklahoma is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself the balance of my time. And in closing, I urge all my colleagues to support the resolution. Today's rule will make in order the Department of Defense Appropriations Act for fiscal year 2024. It will provide full and complete funding for our national defense needs, ensuring that our service members are fairly paid and supporting the well-being of military families. It also makes certain that our troops will never face a fair fight by giving them every advantage possible. We make appropriate investments in the development and acquisition of weapon systems needed to preserve and defend freedom around the globe and restrict the Biden administration from forcing progressive ideology on the armed forces and circumventing the authority of Congress when it does so. Bottom line, the bill targets resources to its core mission, protecting our homeland and security interests and making sure that our forces are the best trained, the best equipped, and the best prepared in the world. To my friends, it's been an interesting debate. It always is. I enjoy exchanging observations with my good friend from New Mexico, and we strayed sometimes off this bill and off this rule. I do want to mention a couple of things. The rule, I think even my friends would agree, is a pretty robust rule. We're going to have 184 amendments, a very thorough debate, so I look forward to that. Second, it's lost sometimes, but we actually basically fund the military at the level that the president requested. So those people that think it's over the top probably should have their argument with the White House as opposed to us. Personally, I would have liked to have done more, but we're going to go with the president's number, essentially. Finally, we do disagree about the manner in which the administration is using the military. We think they're advancing progressive ideology when they ought to be focused on weapons acquisition, training, and warfighting. And we think that ultimately weakens the country. We live in a very dangerous world right now. I would actually argue we're not spending enough on defense when we look at what is happening in the Western Pacific with China, when we look at what the Russians are doing, the acts they are engaged in. in Ukraine. I want a robust budget, and I want one that we come together on. In the end, I think we will be able to achieve that, and I look forward to working, my friends, to accomplish that objective. Mr. Speaker, with that, I yield back the balance of my time. I move the previous question on the resolution.
The gentleman yields back. The question is on ordering the previous question on the resolution. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker, I request the yeas and nays.
The yeas and nays are requested. Those favoring a vote by the yeas and nays will rise. A sufficient number having risen, the yeas and nays are ordered. Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, further proceedings on this question are postponed. Pursuant to Clause 12A of Rule 1, the Chair declares the House in recess, subject to the call of the Chair. The House will be in order. For what purpose does the gentleman from Alabama seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, pursuant to Clause 1, Rule 22, and by direction of the Committee on Armed Services, I have a motion at the desk.
The clerk will report the motion.
Mr. Rogers of Alabama moves to take from the Speaker's table the bill H.R. 2670 with the Senate amendment thereto, disagree with the Senate amendment, and request a conference with the Senate thereon.
The gentleman from Alabama is recognized for 1 hour.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield back the balance of my time, and I move the previous question on the motion.
Without objection, the previous question is ordered. The question is on the motion offered by the gentleman from Alabama. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no.
Got to call the voice vote first.
In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The gentleman from Washington.
Sorry about that. I request the yeas and nays.
The yeas and nays are requested. Those favoring a vote by the yeas and nays will rise. A sufficient number having risen, the yeas and nays are ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device. Pursuant to Clause 9 of Rule 20, this 15-minute vote on the motion will be followed by a 5-minute votes on a motion to close portions of the conference pursuant to Clause 12 of Rule 22 if offered, ordering the previous question on House Resolution 680 and adoption of House Resolution 680 if ordered. This is a 15-minute vote. any member wish to change their vote? On this vote, the yeas are 393, the nays are 27. The motion is adopted without objection. A motion to reconsider is laid on the table. For what purpose does the gentleman from Alabama rise?
Mr. Speaker, pursuant to Clause 12 of Rule 22, I move that meetings of the conference between the House and Senate on H.R. 2670 may be closed to the public at such times as classified national security information may be discussed, provided that any sitting member of Congress shall be entitled to attend any meeting of the conference.
Pursuant to Clause 12 of Rule 22, the motion is not debatable and the yeas or nays are ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device. This is a 5-minute vote. On this vote, the yeas are 401 and the nays are 19. The motion is adopted without objection. A motion to reconsider is laid on the table. Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, the unfinished business is the question on ordering the previous question on House Resolution 680, on which the yeas and nays were ordered. The clerk will report the title of the resolution.
House Resolution 680, providing for consideration of the bill H.R. 1435 to amend the Clean Air Act to prevent the elimination of the sale of internal combustion engines and providing for consideration of the bill H.R. 4365, making appropriations for the Department of Defense for fiscal year ending September 30, 2024, and for other purposes.
The question is on ordering the previous question. Members will record their votes by electronic device. This is a 5-minute vote.
comes Ms. Waters.
On this vote, the yeas are 217 and the nays are 209. The previous question is ordered. The question is on adoption of the resolution. Those in favor say aye. The question is on adoption of the resolution. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. For what purpose does the gentle lady from New Mexico seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I request a recorded vote.
A recorded vote is requested. Those favoring a recorded vote will rise. A sufficient number having risen, a recorded vote is ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device. This is a 5-minute vote. Does any member wish to change the vote? On this vote, the yeas are 212, the nays are 214. The resolution is not adopted. Without objection, a motion to reconsider is laid on the table. Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, the unfinished business is the question on suspending the rules and passing Senate 112, which the clerk will report by title.
Senate 112, an act to amend Title 38 United States Code to strengthen benefits for children of Vietnam veterans born with spina bifida and for other purposes.
The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass the bill? So many as are in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, 2/3 being in the affirmative.
Sure.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Illinois seek recognition?
Request the yeas and nays.
The yeas and nays are requested. Those favoring a vote by the yeas and nays will rise. A sufficient number having risen, the yeas and nays are ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device. This is a 5-minute vote.
On this vote, the yeas are 422 and the nays are 0. 2/3 being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended, the bill is passed, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. Without objection, the chair appoints the following conferees on H.R. 2670.
Services for consideration of the House bill and the Senate amendment and modifications committed to conference. Messrs. Rogers of Alabama, Wilson of South Carolina, Lamborn, Whitman, Austin Scott of Georgia, Ms. Stefanik, Messrs. Desjarlais, Kelly of Mississippi, Gallagher, Gates, Bacon, Banks, Bergman, Waltz, Johnson of Louisiana, Mrs. McLean, Messrs. Jackson of Texas, Fallon, Jimenez, Messrs. Mace and Green of Georgia, Messrs. Smith of Washington, Courtney, Garamendi, Norcross, Gallego, Mouton, Carbajal, Khanna, Keating, Kim of New Jersey, Mrs. Houlihan, Slotkin, Sherrill, and Escobar. From the Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence for consideration of matters within the jurisdiction of that committee under Clause 11 of Rule 10, Messrs. Turner, Wenstrup, and Himes. From the Committee on Education and the Workforce for consideration of sections 636, 651 through 655, 658 through 61, 1041 and 1042 of the House bill and sections 303, 563, 592, 593, 1079, 1090K, 1099JJ, 1726, and 3142 of the Senate amendment and modifications committed to conference. Ms. Fox, Messrs. Owens and Scott of Virginia. From the Committee on Energy and Commerce for consideration of sections 224, 749, and 3121 of the House bill and sections 314, 712 of Division A, 1087, 1088, 1090A, 1090G, 1090II, 3122 through 24, 3143, 3144, 6074, 8141, and Section 11,009 of Division J of the Senate Amendment and modifications committed to conference, Messrs. Carter of Georgia, Pfluger, and Pallone. From the Committee on Financial Services, for consideration of Subtitle J of Title 10 of Division A, Section 1086, Title 68 of Division F, Division I, and Division J of the Senate Amendment and modifications committed to conference, Messrs. McHenry and Lukemeyer and Ms. Waters. From the Committee on Foreign Affairs for consideration of sections 217, 1009, 1080K, 1210, 1211, 1213, 1214, 1216, 1220, 1220A, 1220C, 1220G, 1220K, 1220L, 1221 through 24, 1234, 1245, 1250, 1310L, 1505 and 1883 of the House bill and sections 212, 1085, 1302, 1397, 1399B, 1399D, 1399E, 1399F, 1399I, 1399J, 1399K, 1399L, subtitles H through K of Title 13 of Division A, sections 1634, 6031, 6242, 6293, Division F, and sections 11104 and 11105 of the Senate Amendment and modifications committed to conference, Messrs. McCall, McCormick, and Meeks. From the Committee on the Judiciary for consideration of sections 542, 822, 1049, 1689, and 3116 of the House bill, and sections 1041, 1090H, subtitles I and K of Title 10 of Division A, subtitle I of Title 13 of Division A, sections 6031, 6075, 6082, 6084, subtitle H of Title 60 of Division E, sections 6813, 6816, 6821, 6831 of Division E, sections 9007, 9011, 9012, 9014, and Title 71 of the Senate Amendment and modifications committed to conference, Mr. Issa, Ms. Lee of Florida, and Mr. Nadler. From the Committee on Natural Resources for consideration of sections 261, 510, 1853, 1865, 2843, 2844, 2847, and 3515 of the House bill, and sections 312, 1041, 1090G, 2805, 6711, 11002 of Division J, Division K, and Section 341 of the Senate Amendment and Modifications committed to conference. Mr. Carl, Ms. Hageman, and Mr. Grijalva. From the Committee on Oversight and Accountability, for consideration of Sections 364, 834, 891, 899C, 921, 922, 1047, 1101 through 10, 1116 through 18, 1122, 1221, 1222, 1521, 1523, 1805, and 1880 of the House Bill, and Sections 537, 867, Subtitle H of Title 10 of Division A, Sections 1201 through 3, 1206 through 9, 1211 through 13, 1215, 1512, 11133, 6101, 6202, 6203, 6607, Section 6831 of Division E, 8141, 9005, 331 through 33, and Sections 601, 603, 605, 703, 704, 715 through 18, 802, and 1001 of Division M, and Sections 11,001 and 11,002 of Division L of the Senate Amendment and Modifications committed to conference. Messrs. Grothman, Perry, and Raskin. From the Committee on Science, Space, and Technology for consideration of Sections 886, 1608, 1875, and 1879 of the House Bill, and Sections 308, 845, 1090E, 1090G, 3144, 5204, and Title 10 of Division M of the Senate Amendment and Modifications committed to conference. Messrs. Mike Garcia of California and Collins, and Ms. Lofgren. From the Committee on Small Business for consideration of Sections 223, 853, 881, 882, 884, and 886 of the House Bill, and Sections 141, 823, 831, 841 through 45, 849 through 52, and 5841 of the Senate Amendment and Modifications committed to conference. Messrs. Molinaro and Alford, and Ms. Velasquez. From the Committee on Transportation and Infrastructure for consideration on Sections 315, 707, 723, 866, 1602, 1608, 1804, 1854, 3501, 3511 through 13, 3515, 3531, and 3533 of the House Bill, and Sections 314, 1083, 1090D, 1399N, 1606, 1644, 2814, Title 35 of Division C, Sections 6079, 6226, 8141, and Division H of the Senate Amendment and Modifications committed to conference. Messrs. Graves of Missouri, Webster of Florida, and Larson of Washington. From the Committee on Veterans Affairs for consideration of Sections 571, 572, 579, 1118, 1413, 1733, and 1885 of the House Bill, and Sections 1084, 1090B, 1521, 1833, 1852, 6071, 6077, and 11020 of the Senate Amendment and Modifications committed to conference. Messrs. Bost, Luttrell, and Takano.
The chair will now entertain requests for 1-minute speeches. For what purpose does the gentleman from New Jersey? You are recognized. Without objection, you are recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to discuss, Madam Speaker, I apologize. I rise today to discuss the need for the Freight Rail Workforce Safety Act. I introduced this bill to give our critical railroad workers 7 days of sick paid leave. It would allow them to care for their health and the health of family members without using their vacation time. It is a benefit enjoyed by millions of Americans, workers every single day. Yet, for some reason, railroad companies have refused to provide it to railroad workers, but they do provide it to railroad management. Our railroad workers should have the right to paid sick leave. They risk their health and safety to keep food and medicine on store shelves during COVID-19 pandemic. This bill would allow them to take care of their health without worrying about their income. And I encourage all of my colleagues to support it. You have it here in the Congress. Your staff has it here in the Congress. The railroad workers need it as well. And with that, I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Florida seek recognition? Without objection, the gentlewoman is recognized for 1 minute.
Get this right. Madam Speaker, my. The Republican attacks on reproductive freedom never ends. The latest target are servicewomen in the military. Many of our 500 military bases are located in states that now ban or severely restrict abortion. That's why the Department of Defense established a travel allowance for service members and dependents who need to go to another state for abortion. Now, shamelessly, the Republicans are seeking to block that effort. And these military women, they leave their homes, their families, their friends, they train hard, they have dreams, they have goals. We trust them with Blackhawks, with special ops. We should trust them with the very personal decision of whether or when to start a family. They stand for our freedom. It is time for us to stand for theirs. And I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Pennsylvania?
Madam Speaker, I move that the House do now adjourn.
The question is on the motion to adjourn. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The motion is adopted. Accordingly, the House stands adjourned until 10 a.m. tomorrow morning for morning hour debate.